Amen. Good morning. Welcome to Bible study. Good to see you all here on a chilly morning. I guess I'm the only one that's cold. Apparently, I'm the only one that's not adjusting to winter well. So anyway, we're going to continue our Bible study series we've been working on now for a couple of weeks, talking about resolving conflict. You know, one of the unpleasant realities of life is conflict. This is true in all relationships. This is true in work, school, family, church, etc. But there's a few basic truths about conflict that we've been discussing, and we will continue to develop these themes over the next few weeks. One is the obvious: everyone has conflict. And along with that, most people don't know how to resolve it. For most people, resolving conflict actually means just getting over it, right? They just get to a place, they forget about it. We're not going to talk about that anymore. Or they walk away from relationships, and that's it. That is their method for conflict resolution. But the Bible gives us wisdom for resolving conflict. There's much to say in Scripture about conflict, and the three basic truths that we've been dealing with in this series. Number one, conflict is a heart issue. This is the non-negotiable. It's interesting, every conversation we've had about this, every week we have questions. In between services, I have questions. And it always comes back to people want to ask about the facts. Yeah, but Pastor, but you don't know what they said to me. But conflict is a heart issue. And then if we're going to resolve it, it is an issue of understanding. There's a proper understanding to resolving conflict. And there is a skill. I believe that you can learn to get good at resolving conflict. And this is a very important skill in life. So this morning, we're going to talk about our focus in conflict. We'll talk about conflict focus. Go ahead and read our text, Ephesians 4, verses 1 to 3.
I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long-suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
Okay, so here Paul is writing to a church. That's what the book of Ephesians is. It's the church in Ephesus. And he says, I'm beseeching, literally, I'm begging you, walk worthy. And then he makes these statements: bearing with one another in love, and endeavoring, that means working to keep the unity of the Spirit. So let's talk first about the incorrect focus. Incorrect focus. So conflict involves emotions. If that wasn't true, we wouldn't need to have this lesson series. There's always emotion involved when we have conflict. Right? It's not just math. If it was a math problem, it'd be simple. Oh, no, 2 plus 2, here's the answer. Oh, thank you, Pastor, you're so smart. But it's not. It's emotions that get involved. So what kind of emotions? Give me some ideas. What emotions are involved in conflict? Any? Michelle? Anger? Shannon? Irritation? What's that? Being rash. Okay, yes. What else? Other emotions, yes. Sorrow, yeah, good. Bongi. Betrayal. Jealousy. What was that? Annoyance, yeah. Right, the point is we could go on and on, right? We could do this the rest of the day, and it'll get worse. And I'll tell you another thing, right? But emotion is naturally produced by conflict. There's pain and hurt. These things, they cause pain inside. We talked about anger, fear. And you're in conflict with someone, you can fear, actually. Some people, when you come to church, you're nervous. Am I going to see them? Am I going to have to talk to them? Am I going to be able to avoid them or not? Despair, often, hopelessness. I've talked to many people that they feel there's no way we could ever resolve this conflict. That's despair. And of course, we could talk about rejection, betrayal, all of these things. But the problem is that emotions, they do something unique to the human brain. When we experience a strong emotion, we instinctively focus on it, just like physical pain. When I was a kid, my dad would always tell me, if I ever had, if I hurt myself, if I hurt my right hand, he's all, here, let me smash your left hand with the hammer. You'll forget all about your right hand. Now, that's terrible advice, right? And he never did that. See, my hands are okay. So, but the point is, your mind will focus on pain, even if it's a little thing, right? You could hurt your toe, and while you're walking, all you can think about is your toe, right? It's the way our mind works, but that's true in emotion as well. Emotion will make you focus on things. So, emotion from conflict or from the violation causes us to focus on it. And our brains have an amazing faculty of memory. We begin to focus on this violation, and then we begin to put it on loop, right? It's like the world's worst rerun. And it just keeps going over and over and over. But the thing about it is different than reruns on television. When you are reliving your hurt, you're literally reliving it. You feel the hurt and the betrayal again. Some of you can be laying in bed at night and you remember something that happened years ago, and your heart starts beating fast. You're angry, and all of a sudden you're wide awake, and I just can't believe they said that, right? Because we are literally reliving it. We are re-experiencing the hurt over and over and over. So here's the problem. The emotion draws our focus, and our focus then becomes the dominating factor of whether or not we can resolve this conflict. And your focus in conflict is going to determine your future. In many, many ways. It's going to literally write the future of your life and of your relationship. It's going to determine our emotional health. It will determine our spiritual health. Your focus will determine your happiness. This might sound really harsh, but crummy things happen in life. Oh well. You're never going to live a life where bad things don't happen. So think about this. You could do this. You could wake up every morning and get out your list. Here's all the bad things that happened to me. I remember. And suffer or not. But see, your focus is going to determine your happiness. And there's some people that they are unhappy by choice. They choose to focus on the violation. So your focus will determine your happiness. Your focus will determine the future of that relationship. This person, whether or not you go on to have a happy marriage or a happy relationship in the church or whatever it is, your focus will determine that. Again, it's not whether or not they did wrong. It's your focus that's going to determine the future. Your focus determines whether or not it can be healed. And even, I believe, your focus can determine your spiritual destiny. But here's the problem. Is that for most of us, our focus is usually wrong. It is very rare that we have the correct focus in conflict. First, we focus on the other person. And everyone's saying, duh, of course, Pastor. They're the jerk. That's why I'm focused on them. I want to tell you this is an incorrect focus. First, we focus on the details of the offense. What they did, what they failed to do, what they said, what they didn't say, right? How they looked at you. We focus on the details, and it's amazing how detailed we can get, can't we, right? As time goes on, you remember things. Yeah, and I remember, and that day he was wearing the red tie. Yeah, and another thing. What? You don't even remember what you had for breakfast today. But you remember every detail. Yeah, and also because that was the day I remember because, it was also the third day of, every little detail. It's interesting. When people hurt you, that is the only time that you have perfect memory. Ever. Right? It doesn't matter that we forget about every bad thing that we've done in life. Genesis 27:36.
And there was a strife between the henchmen of Abraham's livestock and the henchmen.
No. Sorry. Genesis 27:36. Is it not there? Oh, man, my first mistake of the day. Dang. All right, Genesis 27:36. And Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing. And he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? If you guys will check the computer, that scripture isn't even in this entire lesson. You've got the wrong lesson on there somewhere. Maybe Jabu, if you can take a peek, see if we need to find the right slides here. So, all right, so Esau, is he not rightly named Jacob? He supplanted me these 2 times, took away my birthright, etc. He remembers what his brother did, but he has no memory of him selling his birthright. But listen, here's the point. In violation, we have perfect memories. You remember the hurtful words that you spoke when you were a child. You remember things, they're emblazoned on your heart and your spirit. Impressions, images, right? I remember things from when I was very little. I couldn't even tell you how old I was. I was too little to even form coherent memories, but I remember some bad things that happened because those things stick with us. But the problem is this becomes a focus. And so in conflict, we focus on it as if it is data. Like it's data that we plug into an equation. They said this, and it was on Tuesday, right, June 17, right, and we plug it in. Here are the facts. You hurt me in such and such a way. So we're focusing on the facts. Then we focus on their motives, right? In conflict, we're always worried about their motives, aren't we? But here's the thing. How do you know what their motives are? We're mind readers, right? And if I asked anyone, are you a mind reader? You'd say, no, Pastor, of course not. Oh, but get in a fight with someone, and you're a mind reader, aren't you, Pastor? And I know, and they said that because? Really? You know they said that because? Or maybe they just said that because it was a dumb thing to say. But see, now we're convinced. I know they're out to get us. They did that on purpose. If she knew, right, she would never have worn that dress because she knows. We know their motives somehow. You know, sometimes people just do foolish things. Is that right? People do foolish, dumb things. Even we might do that occasionally. Probably not. It's only other people. But the problem is we believe that we know their motives. They said that and we know, I see, they were trying to hurt me. They're trying to bring harm to me or my family. So we focus on motives. And then, of course, we focus on every other failing that they have ever been involved in, right? If someone hurts us on Tuesday, it's never about Tuesday, is it? Oh, this reminds me, because you know what? Last year I heard they said that to this other person in church. Yep. And you know what? A couple years ago, you know what I heard? They posted, I screenshotted their WhatsApp status. We've recorded every event, right? That's called getting historical, right? We dig up every past offense. That's called getting archaeological, right? We bring them all in. It's interesting in counseling. One of the things that I have to say very often if I'm counseling conflict is I have to stop people and say, wait a minute. How does that apply? People will bring things up, you know. This is a true story. I was counseling a married couple, wasn't here, so don't worry. I have to say that because people are like, who was it, you know? Counseling this couple, I'd counseled them many, many times, and it would have been So in the conversation, the wife actually said in 1997, and then brought out, you know, this whole thing. Oh, you know, okay, fine. So we kind of dealt with it. Then we move on, and the husband, now we're talking, and he says, you know, but Pastor, you know, she says this very often. And she's like, well, what do you mean? He said, you know, you said that last week, and you said it, you know, like a month ago, you said the same thing. She's like, well, why are you bringing up the past? And I was like, wait, and I pulled out my notes. I'm like, did you not just say 1997? Right? I still lived with my mom in 1997, right? Sorry, but we bring these things up, and so often I have to do that, but this doesn't apply. That's a different event. You're having a conflict about finances. Okay, we're talking about that. But now you want to talk about, you know, his mom. That's not related. That's a different event. But we bring them in because when we're in conflict, we treat it like a trial. You know, in a trial, they have different kinds of witnesses. Some witnesses bring the facts, right? Which, of course, we focus on the facts. Then you have the motive witnesses, right? We believe they've got a motive to have committed this crime. And then you have character witnesses, don't you? right? They bring them in and they will testify, yes, this man has a history of doing such and such. But see, when you're in conflict with someone in the church or with your spouse or a family member, this isn't a trial. We don't need to bring in, we know who we are. It's not about bringing in data from the past to prove who the person is. It's about resolving this issue. And so think about all of these things. We are engaged in this. We're focused on the other person. Why? Because we want to win, right? When I announced that I was doing a series on resolving conflict, a lot of you got excited. Yes, now I'm going to know how to win. And now we're only 3 weeks into this, and you guys have kind of come to the realization that I'm not teaching anyone how to win, am I? But see, that's the problem, is that we're focused on winning because we're focused on the other person. So let me just ask a quick question, maybe take a stab at this. What do you think the other wrong focus is? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Pumlani? Yes. So we focus on ourselves. Here are the great wrong focuses in conflict. We focus on the other person, and then we focus on ourselves. And of course, this is where we focus the most time and attention. First, we focus on our feelings, right? How hurt we are, right? And we can wax eloquent about this. We can talk about how, hurt, how painful it was. We can then talk about how angry we are. We're focused on this. We're attention to this. We focus on how disappointed we might be or how afraid we are, and on and on and on. And like I said before, the amazing thing about human memory is that we can feel it today, just like we did all those years ago. So we're focused on our feelings. And here's the problem with emotion, is that emotion lies to you. Listen, emotion lies to you. I'm not going to maybe ask you to confess, give the details, but has anyone ever cried at a movie? Oh, come on now. You liars. Yes, see? Those people aren't real. Emotion lies to you. So years ago, when I was quite little, I was with my sister. We were someone was watching us. My parents were maybe out of town. And I hear this sobbing. Oh my God, I was little. I thought maybe someone got hurt or what. I go out and my sister, she's got tissues. She would have been a teenager, I'm sure, at the time. And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, the coffee. I'm like, what is going on? She was crying so hard, I couldn't. Finally, when she called me, you know what it was? It was a commercial on television, a coffee commercial, and the story. Commercials nowadays are lame. Commercials when we were kids were way better, right? It was a whole storyline, and the guy didn't get his morning coffee. And then he had to go to work, and he was all sad without his coffee. She's crying. It's easy to poke fun at someone else, but the truth is, your emotions lie to you. All of them. Now, emotion's good. It's God-given. The rule isn't don't have emotion. This is not a lesson about that. But the problem is that we believe that all of our emotions are valid. Everyone else's emotions are lying to you. Pastor Heimberg, your sister is so silly. That's dumb. But see, this person hurt me, and it's real because I feel it. That's real. And we actually believe the size of the emotion is actually an indicator of how valid the feeling is. If you are really, really, really upset, then you really have a right to be. Because it must be real. You feel it so strongly, right? If I feel this, how could it be wrong? But the problem is that very often we see things incorrectly. We interpret things incorrectly. We feel them incorrectly. And so we can have these great emotions going on inside, and they could be totally false. Genesis 47, verse 9.
And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage.
Okay, so this Jacob was the first. There's a great Yiddish word, is kvetching, which is it's like bitter complaining for no reason. So Jacob, he was the pioneer. Jacob has had a pretty remarkable life. He was a really wealthy guy. He had now 13 sons, grandkids, all this. Now, in the midst of the worst famine in all of world history up till that point, he gets rescued by his son, who happens to be one of the richest dudes in the world and is the prime minister for Pharaoh, right? I mean, like, everything is going pretty darn well for Jacob. And when he goes to meet Pharaoh, right, this is the years are 130 years, few and evil have been the days. You know what? He's wrong. He's totally wrong. But he believes it because he feels it. So this is the first problem. We focus on our feelings. And then because of that, we begin to justify our actions. Right? Well, yeah, I did do that. Did you say this? Yes, I did. But I did it because, did you see what they did? Did you hear what they said? What do you expect? What else could I do? I've counseled people. Did you punch him in the face right before church? Yes, of course I did. What did you expect? I mean, he took my parking spot. What? Right, but we justify. Of course, I must be right. That's nothing compared to what you did or what they did. And again, the reason that we focus on ourselves is because the point is to win. Right? We want to get our way in conflict. So focusing on ourselves, unfortunately, will often lead to impulsive decisions that make matters worse in conflict. We will say hurtful things. We will do foolish things. We'll quit, right? You smash something, you break something because you're upset, and all it does is make things worse. And here's the problem with the wrong focus, is as long as we have the wrong focus, we do not move on. You cannot make progress when your focus in conflict is incorrect. Matthew 18:34.
And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him.
It's interesting. The context here was two men. They're having a bit of a conflict and they couldn't resolve it. And so the master said, fine, if you can't resolve it, off to jail with you. So you don't go anywhere. Life stops here. I tell you, that's a great lesson. And you know what? There's people, maybe even here this morning, and you can't tell by looking at you visibly, but in your emotional life or in your spiritual life, you're that man. You're stuck. You are locked up in that conflict. Doesn't matter if it was a week ago or 10 years ago. You're stuck there because, listen, if you can't get the right focus and resolve these things, you'll never move on. You become stuck in place. And that's the sad part of life, is how many people are literally stuck because of relationship conflict. They simply can't move on. People that have petty feuds and strife, these issues that go on in life, and maybe it's been so long you don't even remember what the original conflict was about, but you're stuck in life because of the wrong conflict. Okay, I want to stop for a moment, open up for questions. We've talked about the incorrect focus in conflict. Maybe if you've got a question about this so far before we move on, you raise your hand. Okay, Shannon.
Pastor, how do you go about, when you obviously get into a feud with someone and, obviously you just want to make things right and move on, and you
Right.
go to a person and you want to make things right, but then this person is so nitpicking and so factual biased. They don't just want to fight about the issue that is at hand. They bring up the past, and now you're forced to justify what has happened in the past or the mistakes you've made in the past. Or sometimes you don't even remember what has happened in
Right.
the past. Now you have to go back and think deep, and your focus is also in that situation.
Right.
Just brought back to having to fight your side of the story now.
Right. Well, again, if someone is able to draw you into that, it's a focus issue. So people can say all kinds of things. They can bring up all kinds of things, but you should never feel obligated to fight about them, right? I think I said this to someone last week. You can't have a fight if one person doesn't participate. And so I've apologized. There's a man, it's a story too long for today, but a grievous, deep violation. And finally, in a moment I was fasting and praying about this, and God said, go apologize to him. Right? Get behind me, Satan. What? apologize. And it wasn't one of, there's a lot of conflicts where it's definitely two-sided. This was a demonic assault, right? But God, it was clear, go apologize to him. I said, fine. I went and apologized to him. And his response was to bring up a whole bunch of other nonsense and imagined things. But you know what? God told me to apologize to him, not to fight with him about his fantasies. Okay, cool, man. I'm still, my apology still stands. I'm sorry for whatever happened. And so I just can't let people draw me into that. So that's the issue. People, and again, I think I mentioned this in Serious Men yesterday, when we are resolving issues, we can never dictate what the other person does, only what we do, right? And so I can apologize, I can forgive. They may not ever do any of those things, right? But my response has to be right. Good question. Very good. What else? Yes, far over here.
No, I think it's also like that scripture that says, just give the other cheek. As a child of God, this is what we need to do. Sometimes you feel you're like a doormat. Everyone is walking over you. But God always says, who are you to judge another man's servant? And we need to forgive also.
Right.
According to the word of God. So as Christians, we need to love like what the word of God is telling us to love. So it doesn't matter what is happening to us out there in the world.
Yes.
So if we focus on the word of God, I think that will be our defense.
Yep, very good. Very good. What else? Any other questions regarding our incorrect focus before we move on? Okay, Tumi?
Pastor, you talked about being stuck. Would you say it's also being stuck if you forgive the person, but you forgive the situation and you move on, but you're living in a constant state of, I'm expecting this to happen again, and I'm going to be ready.
Right.
So it's almost like you have this,
Yeah.
the defenses are up, but they're not really up. You're okay, you're smiling, but as you're like, I know this is going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and so then you've allowed someone else to dictate your future, which is a very unhealthy way to live. Very true. Simon?
Pastor, you spoke about basically focusing on the violation and, and the emotions. Sometimes you find that your emotions are not in check. And, sometimes you find that emotions can be terrible drivers, but good passengers at times, meaning you keep your emotions in check. And then the person that you basically trying to resolve conflict with, and it's just a follow-up a little bit on what Sister Tumi said, that you try and you know that, I have to be on guard just for something, that can happen. How do you go about? You know that you can keep your emotions in check, but you're always cognizant of the fact that they can basically
Right.
turn the situation around.
Right.
How do you deal with it?
Well, I think at some point we have to find the difference between awareness and suspicion, right? I'm aware that the world is a dangerous place and that people will hurt me, but I can't live my life in suspicion. Suspicion is the toxic bit, right? I just know it's right around the corner, right? Anyone who looks like that, they're probably going to rob me. Anyone who looks like that, they're going to hurt me, right? That's a deadly way to live life. Of course, you're aware. You protect yourself, various, of course, when we talk about conflict, we're talking about usually family, personal things that can be very close. We set up very simple boundaries in life to protect ourselves, but you can't live in that toxic realm of suspicion because suspicion actually is more like faith, isn't it? Suspicion is like, I have faith that this person is going to do me wrong again, and that's an incorrect focus. So, yeah, very good. So let's talk then finally about focusing on God. This is our correct focus. So, the incorrect focus in conflict, of course, is people, whether it's the other person or ourselves. The focusing on God is the key to adjusting our focus in conflict. Most people, and I would dare say all of us at times, we forget to focus on God in our conflicts. In other words, we forget to look up. Two statements I want to make about God and conflict. Number one, God is the unseen observer in every conflict. We have to always be conscious of this. Genesis 16, verse 13.
Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees. For she said, have I also here seen him who sees me?
Now, this is the story of Sarah and the Egyptian servant. And so, there's great conflict. Her mistress, Sarah, mistreats her terribly, right? It's incredible violation. In fact, the whole family, it's a mess. And so, it gets so bad, the conflict gets so bad that she ends up taking her boy, going into the desert, wandering, and waiting for the boy to die. That's how bad it is. This isn't like, hey, you said something rude to me. But then God shows up and he does a miracle for her. But her revelation of God in that is that you are the God who sees. But what did he see? It's not just that he saw, a little boy who was thirsty. He saw the conflict. He saw the violation. He saw everything that was happening and he intervened. And so listen, this is a crucial revelation. God is the unseen observer in every conflict. Genesis 31, verses 48 and 49.
And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Galeed, also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another.
And so here is Jacob and Laban there. This is as he's leaving his father-in-law. There was serious conflict there over wives and grandchildren and money. And God shows up and intervenes. And so they set up this altar, this place, and it says witness between us. But it literally means God sees. God sees what happened here between us. God is the witness of this. So, if I say God is the unseen observer in every conflict, then that means you and I need to ask ourselves these questions. It's something worth pondering. What does God see in your conflict? In the one that you're in right now, or the one that's on your mind right now, right? What does God see? How does God view that? How does God view the actions and the interactions of his people in that? Right? What perspective might God have in that conflict? So, this is statement number one. God is the unseen observer in every conflict. But now, the second truth about God is that God has a purpose in every conflict. And this is the part that we don't like. When we say things like God has a purpose, Christians sometimes get nervous because they think, oh, great, buckle up. That means I have to survive this, right? You're right. You judged it correctly. God has a purpose in every conflict. It might be in us. This might be in other people. He has purposes in the earth. But listen, God's purposes are higher than ours. His understanding is greater than ours. His plan is greater than ours. And so, this might mean that he has a purpose for this conflict. Conflict sometimes is very good for you. Extremely, extraordinarily, overwhelmingly good for you. And I know we don't like that. We would rather not have any conflict, but God might have a purpose for it. Jacob and Laban, this is fascinating. He goes there. Jacob is running away from his murderous brother. He finds the uncle and finds he's not much better. He's a scam artist, goes to work for him. But then he's such a scammer, he keeps changing his wages. That's the conflict. That's the first conflict. Think about this. If you went to your work tomorrow and the boss said, hey, guess what? New pay scale. Now you get paid on, how many items of blue clothing you're wearing today. What? It doesn't even make sense. Why don't you pay me for how many hours I work? Right? That's a conflict, right? But God had a great purpose there in Jacob, and we could do a whole lesson on this. I won't, but, right, Jacob's character was changed. He was the man that he made everything happen by his own might and his own will. Well, suddenly he couldn't do that, so now it changed. This is why he was able to become Israel, prince with God. Jacob was blessed God began to intervene through the scamming uncle there. And every time the wages were changed, God would move behind the scenes so that he was blessed. Then his family is blessed and grows and all of these things. So his character was being worked out through this ordeal. His blessing was being worked out through this trial. So just consider, if you're in conflict, is it possible God's trying to fix something in you? No, definitely not. Of course not, right? People are like, no, maybe them, right? My point exactly. In conflict, God will fix things in you. He will soften things in you. He will take off some rough edges in you. You know, yesterday in Serious Men, we were talking about a similar subject, and one of the points was you have to overlook some things sometimes. But, you know, overlooking offense, that's not something you can do when you're young and immature and brash and you insist that the world has to run your way. But you know what? You go through some difficult conflicts in life, and you begin to wear some scars. You learn the art of overlooking some things. So listen, I've been through some rough conflicts in my life where God has taken things out of me that needed to be removed, where God has smoothed rough edges in me. He's resolved things in me. He's strengthened things in me, right? He's helped me to have a tender heart towards people. You know, I used to genuinely believe, and this is something we all believe, I used to really believe that if I was in a conflict with someone, it's because they were full of the devil. Right? Isn't that how we all feel that way? I mean, look at me, right? This angelic vision of what a Christian man should be. If anyone disagrees with me, they must be Satan, right? Right? Or his sister. Well, you know, you go through some conflicts and you begin to learn some things about people. And it might be that you're in conflict with them just because they're hurting people. Maybe this great drama that's consuming you isn't because they're evil at all. It's because they're going through a hard time, right? They're wrestling with some things. There was a man I was in ministry with in the Prescott Church. He's still there to this day. He's a great man, a good friend now. But there was a season of conflict. I got to tell you, this guy, at that time, we were newly married. I don't think we even had any kids yet. And he was driving me crazy, to be honest with you. We were involved in always. And so one night, it was a Wednesday night or a Sunday night service before prayer, or before service, you know, we have the prayer meeting, and I needed to go talk to him. And, you know, he was just, he reminded me of my dad. So we were always like, you know. So I went to say, hey, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he didn't look up right away, you know. And I was like, hey, because he was sitting on the floor. And finally, he looks up, and there's tears streaming down his face. And I was like, phew. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry for interrupting, and walked away. And it's like God dropped something on me. Listen, you're so upset that he's irritating, you have no idea what he's going through. But I tell you, the only way I was able to figure that out was by going through some things, going through conflict. So God might be teaching you something in conflict. He might be trying to help you, trying to resolve some things in you. But this could also mean that God has a purpose through the conflict. You know, God's will is greater than our will. God's will is greater even than us. And his will is not put on hold because of our conflict and strife. So we have to be careful that we don't allow our conflict or our strife to derail what he's trying to do in people's lives. Because this is what we do. We want to turn our conflict into an ultimate thing. I've had people come and they bring an issue to me, and I say, okay, thank you for letting me know. And then they'll come to me a couple weeks, Pastor, you know, I noticed they're still coming to church. Right? You didn't execute them yet. Have you talked to them? What's the deal? No one's apologized. You know what? Maybe there's more going on than you. Maybe the world's a little bit bigger than your orbit. So listen, God has a will in conflict. And so here is our call as Christians, is to glorify God even in conflict. 1 Corinthians 10, 31 through 11, verse 1.
So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Give no offense either to the Jew or to the Greek or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. Imitate me as I also imitate Christ.
Now, this is a scripture that we've used often, and I believe it applies broadly. It's not inaccurate to use it the way it's been used, but you need to know that it does say, whatever you do. Whatever you do, do it to the glory of God. Let it glorify God. We usually apply that, in your ministry, in your work, right? Let it glorify God. But whatever you do also has to do with how you handle conflict, doesn't it? When you are in conflict, because it will happen, you should navigate it in a way that brings glory to God. It's interesting, this phrase, to bring glory. You could translate that, the original word could be to shine, but more accurately, it's to bring attention to God. Think about this as Christians. How you live your life, people form their opinions about God based on you, right? This is true of anything. If you meet someone who, maybe the first person you meet who's an American, you form your opinions about Americans based on them. Do all Americans say y'all all the time? No, right? But that's natural. And so people form their opinions about God based on you, on how you react to things. They get their ideas or they learn about God. So just some practical things. When you are in conflict, is your attitude in conflict glorifying God, or is it pleasing to God? I can't answer that question for you, but I think that's something that you need to answer. Are your actions in conflict glorifying God or pleasing to God? Are your words in conflict pleasing to God, or do they bring glory to God? Do your actions, are they helping or hurting other people? Right? And we'll talk about this in an entirely different lesson, but a lot of times in conflict, we want to get other people involved. We bring them in. Hey, do you know what? Did you hear what they said? Do you know what they did? Is that helping people? Does that help people get closer to God, or is that hurting them? Are our actions helping the work of God, what God's trying to do in the earth? Listen, I've been a pastor long enough to see where people, they'll allow their conflict to blow up a ministry. Right? You've got a band or a drama team or a Sunday school class or whatever it is, but man, you've got beef with this person, so whatever, I don't care. Let the ministry die. So, is that bringing glory to God? So this is the issue. We are called to bring glory to God, even in our conflict. So this is a worthy thing to consider. How do we bring glory to God in conflict? Number one, we need to look to God in our conflict. I mentioned in the very beginning of this point that we often forget to look up. We're looking at people, we look at ourselves, but we forget to look to God. When you encounter conflict, number one, you need to consider God's will. Listen, before your will, before how you feel about things, you need to consider God's will. What does God want me to do in this? This is more important than how do I feel about it, right? This is more important than how will this make me look? Will I get credit? Are people going to think I'm this kind of a person? What is it that God wants me to do? Or how will this affect God's will? There's people that what God's will is for your life. Your pursuit of conflict, how you do that, can have an impact on God's will for you. So consider God's will, and then you need to consider God's mercy. And we'll talk about this. We'll do an entire lesson on the issue of mercy. But let's be real. If we are in conflict, if I can drastically simplify, is it safe to say if we're in conflict, it's because someone did something that we didn't like? Is that accurate? Right? And so that's why we are in conflict. What would God do? Would he sort it out? Hey, come here. We're going to talk. We're going to pastor right now. We're going to talk about this. Did you know you said? right? Or maybe God's bigger than that. Maybe God is merciful. And so we will do an entire lesson about the issue of mercy. I understand there's times when we do have to work out the issues, right? We don't just ignore every hurt that happens, right? But we have to consider God's mercy. And then, of course, we need to trust God. If you do these first two things in conflict, if first you consider God, His will, and second you consider God's mercy, one thing I can promise you is that God will ask you to do something that you don't like. Right? God will, like the story I told, God will ask you to forgive, to apologize to someone that you don't need to apologize to. Right? Or God will ask you to forgive someone that didn't ask for forgiveness, or whatever it is. So then, if we're going to glorify God, that means we need to trust God. And this is the crucial issue, is that we trust God and what He says and ask Him to give us the strength to do His will. So we look to God, then we obey God. John 14:15.
If ye love me, keep my commandments.
That's simple, right? Wouldn't it be great if He gave a qualification? If you love me, keep my commandments, unless it's really, really hard. Right? But He just makes it very simple. Matthew 5:16.
Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven.
And again, you can apply this to anything in life, including your conflict. Let your light shine in a way that the way people observe you, it brings glory to God. And then finally, we can imitate God. Ephesians 5, verses 1 and 2.
Therefore be imitators of God as dear children, and walk in love as Christ also has loved us and given Himself for us, an offering and sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma.
Be imitators of God as children and walk in love. So I believe this is a crucial issue. If we can correctly set our focus in conflict and bring glory to God, this will help us tremendously. All right, I want to stop there and open up. We've got a couple of minutes for questions this morning. You got a question about our lesson so far, raise your hand. Very good. Talking about our conflict focus. Yes, cum laude.
Pastor, you mentioned about emotions playing a big part in the conflict. So I want to find out, would you say that you can learn someone's character trait from a specific conflict? I'm trying to kind of relate this, as you're saying that God has a purpose for conflicts. Would you say that that could be a way for you to learn someone's character trait? Would you make a conclusion about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you learn things about people in conflict. That's valuable. You'll learn things about yourself, which is probably more valuable. And then, there's been times in conflict where I've just learned basic life lessons. You go through things and you think, you know what? I don't ever want to be that kind of a person. And mark that down. I have this private list of things I don't ever want to be. And some of those items came from conflict. So yeah, very good. Good question. What else? Nandi.
Pastor, you mentioned a bit about overlooking
Uh-huh.
stuff. How do you ever overlook something as a person who's had a problem in the past with dealing with grudges and unforgiveness? Like, how do you overlook? Because when you have conflict with someone, you just want to just want to tell them.
Right.
How do you overlook sometimes?
So first, I am going to do a whole lesson on overlooking, but I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. Overlooking fault is the master skill of conflict resolution, in my opinion, because it actually keeps you out of most conflict. But it comes from an understanding of who we are before God. Jesus tells the parable of the two debtors, the one that owns 5 and the one that owes 50,000, right? And so the problem with the one that owed 5 is that he couldn't overlook, right? He simply couldn't, the one that owed 50,000, he couldn't overlook. He just didn't have the ability. And so Jesus is making a point. It's a math problem, right? So let's say, I broke into your house, I killed your cat, I stole your jewelry, right? That's terrible, right? But God is always saying, but what did I do for you? But what did I do for you? You killed my son, and I still forgave you. God didn't demand conflict resolution. He willingly chose to overlook our fault. So, obviously, that's easier said than done sometimes. But I believe at the end of the day, it's a math problem, and it has to do with how we view ourselves before God. My experience has been that overlooking fault gets easier the older you get or the longer you serve God, not because of age, but I think in my own life, the longer I've served God, the more I realize how wretched I am. And the more you realize how wretched you are, the easier it is to overlook other people's problems. So that's a really good question. We'll do a whole lesson about that before we're done. Very good. What else? Yes, Spa.
Well, Pastor, I just want to ask about borrowed offense. Let's say maybe you're a person that is given maybe to borrow your friend's offense or maybe your
Right.
offense.
Yes.
And the focus there, what would be the focus? Would you be maybe as the person who is listening to that offense? Are you the one that is the main focus, or does your friend? And where can that lead to?
Well, yeah, there's a number of things there. One, don't ever get involved in someone else's fight. Don't take their offense. That's unhealthy life, unhealthy way to live life. But more than likely, the issue is that the other person, they want to dump on you. You won't believe, what so-and-so did or said, and so they dump that on you. Then, of course, we live in the generation of the social justice warriors. It's a kind of a weird thing. We take on everybody's offense, right? Did you hear about, the people that were born with 4 freckles in Ireland, right? I'm upset, Be upset about things that matter, Anyway, but yeah, I would say that the basic rule is don't ever adopt someone else's offense. Very good. All right, that's all we got time for. We're going to break. Service begins at 10:30.